Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a kitchen that would make even the toughest modern chef cry a little inside. Forget stainless steel counters and touchscreen ovens. Here it's soot, smoke, and the constant fear of setting your dress on fire. The smell of coal lingers in the air like an unwanted guest who refuses to leave. And patience is not a virtue here, it's survival. You crouch low in front of a hearth that breathes heat unevenly, flames licking at the blackened bricks while a pot hangs above, promising dinner but only after what feels like centuries. Honestly, if you had to wait this long for a frozen pizza today, you'd probably just give up and order something else. Here, though you don't have that luxury, and yes, you probably wouldn't last a week in this kitchen. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. I love knowing someone out there is drifting off to sleep as the story unfolds. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The fire crackles, sending out tiny sparks that make you instinctively pull your skirts back. The smoke stings your eyes, and you blink until tears form, though not the sentimental kind. Coal burns dirty, leaving the air heavy and tasting faintly metallic, a reminder that every meal here begins with discomfort. You poke at the embers with an iron rod, trying to coax the flames higher. It's less of a recipe and more of a negotiation, really one where the fire never listens. Your arms already ache from fanning it earlier, your lungs scratchy from breathing the haze. Yet this is just the prelude. The waiting stretches on. You sit, knees tucked under, staring at a pot that trembles faintly as bubbles fight to rise. Each minute passes slower than the last. You think about how today you can microwave leftovers in 2 minutes flat and still complain it takes too long. Here, soup requires a devotion that borders on worship, hours of tending, stirring, shifting the pot to the slightly hotter spot, then back again when the edges boil too fiercely. It's like babysitting, except the baby screams and hisses and spits hot broth if you dare to look away. The kitchen itself doesn't help. Black beams sag with years of smoke, turning everything a dull shade of grey. The smell clings to your hair, your clothes, even your skin. So you carry the scent of the hearth with you long after dinner is done. There's a dampness to seeping through stone walls, making the fire's warmth both blessing and curse. To close and you roast, too far and you shiver. You can't quite win, but you're expected to keep smiling when the meal finally reaches the table. People often imagine Victorian households as orderly, prim, even elegant. The truth is far messier. Kitchens were rarely the heart of the home in the romantic sense. They were smoky dens, more workshop than sanctuary. Meals didn't emerge from gleaming counters, but from soot-covered corners where someone like you spent endless hours keeping the flames alive. The patience demanded wasn't noble. It was exhausting. It wasn't about culinary passion, it was survival. Making sure bread rose despite the drafty air, making sure porridge didn't scorch to the bottom. And yes, there's a strange comfort in the routine. You fall into a rhythm, learning to read the fire's moods, knowing by smell when the soup shifts from raw to ready. Historians still argue whether coal or wood created a harsher cooking environment. But either way, the cooks bore the brunt. Each spark, each cough, each waiting stretch became the backdrop of daily life. Sometimes, when the fire died unexpectedly, the panic was real. Imagine your oven breaking down today, mid-meal, And the only way to fix it was hauling logs or coal and crouching until your face flushed crimson. Dinner could be delayed by hours, guests left murmuring in the next room, stomachs growling louder than the wind outside. You, meanwhile, sit red-eyed and sweaty, bargaining with stubborn flames like a desperate gambler at a crooked table. There are jokes whispered among the servants, too. If you couldn't cry from heartbreak, the smoke would make sure you did. And really, who needs mascara when soot draws natural eyeliner across your face? One swipe of the back of your hand and you look like you've been through a battlefield, which, in a way, you have. The patience isn't just physical, it's mental. Hours of tending the fire leaves you alone with your thoughts, the kind that drift and loop endlessly. You start wondering absurd things, like whether future people will cook without fire at all, just with invisible energy. It sounds ridiculous, yet here you are, half delirious with smoke, dreaming of a kitchen that doesn't leave you coughing up black phlegm. When, finally, mercifully, the meal begins to smell right, there's a fragile joy. The aroma of boiling meat or simmering vegetables seeps through the haze, promising the effort hasn't been wasted. But even then, patience tests you again. You can't rush the process, or you'll end up with half-cooked chunks that embarrass you in front of everyone. So you wait longer, pretending your stomach isn't gnawing itself. Cooking here isn't romantic, though people later like to imagine it so. It's gritty, smoky, endless, and often thankless. But it anchors life, binding the day with its rituals. Each fire lit at dawn is a small declaration. We will eat, we will endure. And as you sit cross-legged by the hearth, eyes stinging, hair frizzed with heat, you realize patience is not something you choose. It chooses you, grips you by the shoulders, and whispers, "You're not done yet." And so you wait. Again, your arms are already tired from battling the fire. But the real workout begins when you try to lift the cookware. The pot in front of you is cast iron, so heavy it feels like someone forged it out of pure spite. You hook your fingers under the handle, strain, and realize you might actually be carrying more weight than when your cousin asked you to babysit her toddler. At least the toddler squirmed and giggled. This pot just sits there, stubborn and lifeless, waiting for you to pull a muscle. And you do, every other day. Who needs a gym membership when your entire kitchen is one long endurance session? The clang echoes when you finally drag the pot closer, the sound ringing through the smoky room like a church bell announcing your misery. The iron burns if you touch it too long, so you wrap your skirt around the handle, pretending that's a safe solution. Spoiler, it's not. Your skirt smolders faintly, and you slap at it, heart racing, until the smoke dies down. That's the third near fire this week, but at least you're getting better at extinguishing yourself quickly. Not exactly a resume skill, but it keeps you alive. Your arms tremble under the weight as you pour broth into bowls. A little spills, hissing where it hits the hearth, but you pretend no one notices. Back then, spilling soup was not just a mess, it was wasted hours of tending, chopping, stirring. Every drop lost is time you'll never get back, and your body reminds you of it with aching shoulders and stiff wrists. You shift, stretch, shake your arms out, but the ache lingers. It always does. People romanticize iron cookware. No, the durability, the rustic aesthetic, the way food caramelizes perfectly. Sure, but they're not trying to haul the thing across a smoky kitchen in petticoats. They don't have to tilt it carefully while sweat drips down their temples, hoping the pot doesn't slip and smash a hole in the stone floor. Because yes, These pots could break stone, and your toes too. Just imagine dropping one barefoot congratulations. Dinner is ruined, and so is your foot. Even spoons and ladles feel oversized, like the kitchen is secretly training you for a medieval joust. The long handles clank against the sides, heavy in your grip, forcing your wrists into a permanent ache. Stirring isn't graceful, it's a full body motion, shoulder to elbow to wrist, repeated endlessly. You hunch forward, muttering curses under your breath, then laugh at yourself, because in this kitchen, complaining is just seasoning for the air. There's a rhythm to it though. Lift, pour, stir, repeat. Your body falls into patterns like a dance, though not the elegant kind you'd see in a ballroom. This is more like a clumsy shuffle, punctuated with grunts and the occasional yelp when steam burns your skin. Still, it keeps the meal moving forward. The iron pot may be merciless, but you adapt. You grow muscles in places you didn't know existed, arms corded with strength no one bothers to admire. After all, when dinner arrives, people thank the Lord, not the aching cook. Historians often argue whether the sheer weight of cookware shaped women's bodies over time, creating a hidden kind of strength that rarely appeared in portraits. It makes sense, every dinner was weight training disguised as duty. Imagine bending over a fire, lugging gallons of liquid stew, balancing it with bare arms while the rest of the house feasted upstairs. Forget dainty silhouettes. Real life carved endurance into bone and muscle. And yet, you can't help but laugh at the absurdity. In a strange way, it's like holding one of those smart appliances, today, the ones that claim to make life easier but weigh so much. You need 2 people to carry them in from the delivery truck. At least your pot doesn't come with a 30-page manual in 6 languages and a cord too short to reach the outlet. No, your misery is refreshingly straightforward, heavy, hot, and guaranteed to leave you sore tomorrow, sometimes. In the quiet moments, you press your palm to the iron and feel its hum. The heat stored deep inside. It's both enemy and ally, punishing your arms but keeping food warm long after you've given up stirring. You tell yourself it's worth it, that feeding everyone makes the bruises and burns fade into background noise. But then someone asks why the soup tastes smoky, and you bite your tongue before explaining that maybe it's because you nearly set yourself on fire while lifting the pot for them. A servant might wander by, offering a half-hearted assist, but they vanish quickly once they realize how heavy the job is. Can't blame them. This is work no one wants, a labor that doesn't sparkle in conversation. Nobody says, "My, what strong forearms you have." At dinner parties, they only notice the food, not the human pulley system behind it. And so you lift again, muscles protesting, spine creaking, arms quivering. The pot gurgles, mocking you with every bubble. You wonder how many more years your body can endure this before it gives out. And then you chuckle, because honestly, you don't have a choice. Dinner isn't optional. Cooking here isn't just patience, it's strength training wrapped in obligation. Every clang of iron reminds you that survival weighs heavier than the pot itself. And as you wipe sweat from your brow, arms shaking, you grip the ladle tighter and keep going, because the kitchen doesn't forgive weakness. Not then, not now. By the time your arms are trembling from the pots, you're only halfway through the ordeal. Because now comes the real gamble. Preparing ingredients under light so dim it makes your eyelids feel heavy. The candle flickers on the wooden table, dripping wax like it's weeping for you, throwing shadows across the chopping board. You squint, tilt your head, and try to decide if what you're holding is actually a carrot or possibly just a very ambitious piece of firewood. Either way, it's going in the pot. The knife glints weakly in the shifting light. Sharp in theory, but more likely to stick halfway through an onion than slice cleanly. Your hand hesitates, blade poised, and suddenly this isn't cooking, it's a guessing game with consequences. Every cut is a gamble. Will you hit the vegetable, or will tomorrow's gossip in the marketplace include your missing fingertip? You grip harder, reminding yourself that fingers are valuable, more valuable than the stew itself. And yet, the shadows keep playing tricks, reshaping food into unrecognizable lumps. Your back aches from leaning too close. The candle smoke curling upward and mixing with the ever-present coal haze. Tears blur your vision, half from onions, half from the sting of smoke. And now the chopping board looks like a watercolor painting. You laugh under your breath, because this isn't cooking. It's survival art, and you're the unwilling artist. And let's be honest, modern people complain. If their kitchen light is too yellow instead of daylight, balanced. Imagine telling them their only bulb is a stub of wax that might sputter out before you finish dicing potatoes. The sheer panic when a draft blows through the cracks, snuffing the flame, plunging you into darkness mid. You freeze, knife hovering, heart pounding, praying you don't chop your hand by instinct. Relighting isn't quick. Either you fumble for matches or spill sparks from the hearth, cursing the air itself for conspiring against dinner. The board beneath your hands is scarred with years of cuts, grooves that trap onion juice and dirt no scrubbing can erase. Sometimes you find yourself tracing those ridges absent-mindedly, wondering how many other hands, how many other cooks, have sweated and cursed over the same board. It's a lineage of exhaustion, written in scratches and stains. You can't help but find humor in it. Chopping vegetables becomes a strange kind of lottery. You think you're slicing turnips into neat chunks, only to discover at dinner that one piece is thick enough to qualify as a doorstop. The family chews politely, though someone inevitably mutters about uneven textures. You bite back a sarcastic retort, because sure, let's all blame the cook, not the fact that the kitchen is lit like a haunted attic. Historians sometimes puzzle over why Victorian kitchens seemed so inefficient, debating whether poor lighting contributed to accidents and wasted food. Honestly, you don't need a debate, you live it every evening. You can't even tell if the herbs you've grabbed are parsley or something random you yanked from the garden by mistake. The shadows blur everything into guesswork. Dinner becomes a test of faith, each spoonful a surprise. And oh, the knives. They dull quickly, and sharpening is its own art form. You drag the blade against a stone, sparks kissing the air, but the result is never as sharp as you hope. So the chopping is slow, uneven, more pressure than finesse. Your wrist aches, your knuckles scrape, and once again you wonder why no one sings ballads about cooks. You're out here risking digits in the dark, and the poets are too busy writing about flowers. Every so often you lean closer, candlelight brushing your cheek, eyes narrowed as you squint at a mysterious lump. Is it meat gone grey from the smoke, or is it bread hardened into stone? You prod it with the knife, laugh when it barely budges, then toss it aside with a shrug. No one will notice. Or maybe they will, because someone always does. But by then, they're too hungry to care. The sounds around you blend into a rhythm, the thud of blade on board, the hiss of fire, the distant chatter of children or servants drifting in. You move in time with it, hypnotized, though always with that edge of caution. You whisper a joke to yourself, how funny it would be if future kitchens had lights so bright they made food look like art. You chuckle, imagining yourself in that world, squinting in disbelief at how easy it would all seem. Still, you adapt. Your eyes adjust. Your hands learn shapes by touch more than sight. A potato's lumpiness, a carrot's smoothness, an onion sting your fingers become your guides when vision fails. It's clumsy, yes, but strangely intimate. Like you're learning to know your ingredients in a way modern cooks never will. The chopping slows, your shoulders sag, but the work continues. Candlelight flickers against the walls, shadows dancing like ghosts of every cook before you. You keep going because you have to, because dinner waits and no one cares how you get there. And as the knife thuds one last time, as the pile of unevenly cut vegetables gathers on the board, you exhale, roll your sore wrists, and whisper to yourself that somehow, miraculously, it will all come together in the pot. The candlelight flickers against the walls as you step back from your cutting board, wiping soot from your cheeks, and now the kitchen introduces a whole new challenge: spices and status. In the world of Victorian cooking, a rare pinch of saffron or a dash of nutmeg isn't just flavor, it's a declaration. Sprinkle a little on the stew, and suddenly the entire meal announces, "Look, I am wealthy, cultured, and I have access to faraway lands you've only read about in books." You can almost see the aristocrats sitting around a polished table, noses raised slightly, measuring the subtle aroma like it's a badge of social rank. For you, the common cook, it's a different story. Your dinner might consist of the same smoky stew, but without the exotic spices. It tastes like, well, it tastes like coal smoke mixed with whatever vegetables survived the trip from the market. You stir in the occasional pinch of salt, marveling that it alone can transform a bland meal into something vaguely recognizable as food. Sometimes you whisper to yourself, "One day, maybe I'll sprinkle in nutmeg too, if I survive the week." Modern cooks complain about microwaves and pre-ground pepper. Back then, the idea of accessing a cinnamon stick was practically a miracle. Meanwhile, the wealthy flaunt their ingredients as if the table itself were a stage. A sprig of parsley isn't just garnish, it's social currency. A hint of ginger in the pie crust, a dash of clove in the pudding. Suddenly, the meal tells a story of trade ships crossing oceans, of exotic markets in India or the Caribbean, of money enough to purchase both flavor and bragging rights. You can imagine them nodding approvingly to each other, fork raised, enjoying the subtle heat of imported spices while someone like you sweats over a boiling pot, daring not to scald yourself with the hot iron. At the marketplace, things are just as theatrical. Spices are displayed in small glass jars, sometimes piled like tiny colored mountains, each one a treasure. The vendors shout their wares, describing the faraway lands each spice has traveled from. Buyers pinch a little between fingers, sniffing, occasionally haggling, and the air smells of pepper, cinnamon, and a faint tinge of desperation. You jostle along in the crowd, elbows nudged aside, heart racing, all while silently calculating. 1 ounce of nutmeg costs more than a week's worth of bread. You smirk, imagining modern supermarkets where you can toss in a jar of anything without blinking. Here, the value is literal, and the stakes feel absurdly high. It's a delicate balance, really. The spices themselves could elevate a simple meal to something remarkable, but only if used sparingly, thoughtfully, without tipping the scales into ruinous extravagance. Use too much, and you risk overwhelming the dish or your family's delicate stomachs. Use too little, and you've wasted a rare treasure. You laugh quietly at the thought, because today, a single teaspoon might as well be a gold coin, and every sprinkle is a gamble. Historians still debate how much the hunger for rare flavors shaped global trade. Some argue it led to dangerous ocean voyages and imperial ambitions. Others claim it simply sparked a craze that kept spice merchants fabulously wealthy. For you, it barely matters. You just know that the exotic jars on the top shelf are tantalizing and untouchable, while you navigate the modest shelf below with salt, a little pepper, and perhaps a wink of dried herbs you grew yourself. It's enough to make you chuckle at the absurdity. Here you are, trying to feed a family, while upstairs, wealth whispers through subtle aromas like a secret only the privileged understand. The disparity is striking in the dining room. Picture it, a grand table with silver cutlery, bowls gleaming with color, a roast spiced to perfection, the cook nowhere to be seen except maybe lurking behind a servant carrying yet another tray. Compare that to your humble spread. Muted colors, minimal seasonings, the occasional smudge of charcoal from the hearth. Yet somehow, you still manage a sense of pride. Because while the wealthy dine in their curated olfactory theater, you survive, improvise, and occasionally, you get lucky enough to taste a hint of something luxurious stolen from the top shelf. And that fleeting burst of flavor feels like victory. And let's not forget the humor in all this. You can't help but imagine a modern chef seeing your kitchen. No temperature control. Open flames. Tiny glass jars of spices that could bankrupt me. Yes, it's absurd, yet you grin, thinking of today's convenience as a mild miracle. In the Victorian kitchen, each meal was an adventure, a negotiation, a comedy of errors played out over open fire and shadowed shelves. By the time the final touches are applied to your humble stew, the contrast between wealth and necessity is painfully clear but strangely funny. You've learned a new kind of respect for the power of spices, not just for taste, but for the social dance they create. A sprinkle here, a dash there, a world of privilege on a plate, while you carry the burden of smoke, heat, and muscle. The irony isn't lost on you, and you chuckle softly, imagining someone centuries from now opening a jar of pepper and wondering how it once carried so much weight, literally and socially. Cooking in this era is never just about feeding mouths. It's about signaling, surviving, and occasionally laughing at the absurd theatrics that a simple pinch of spice can inspire. You shake your head, rubbing a tired arm, knowing the meal will be judged not just by taste, but by what it says about who can afford the flavor. And as you glance at the candlelight, dancing against jars of faraway treasures, you can't help but appreciate the strange, pungent poetry of it all. And just when you think the kitchen couldn't get any more chaotic with the smoke, the heavy pots, and the silent judgment of empty spice jars, you hear the unmistakable sound of little feet, pattering across the wooden floorboards. Children, lots of them, not marching in with angelic faces and helpful little hands. Oh no, they swarm the kitchen like mischievous cats, tugging at skirts, darting dangerously close to the open fire, and occasionally deciding that the best way to contribute is by knocking over a carefully placed bowl of chopped turnips. You try to shoo them away, but shooing in this age rarely works. Instead of scattering, they cling tighter. One grabs your apron string, another insists on helping by stirring a pot far too close to boiling, and the smallest decides this is the perfect moment to cry for bread that hasn't even been baked yet. The air is already thick with smoke, and now it's layered with the shrill notes of childhood chaos. You breathe deeply, wondering if this was secretly the real seasoning of Victorian meals' exasperation. You'd think children could be taught to help, right? Well, in theory. But their help looks more like sabotage. A 6-year-old tasked with peeling potatoes may peel one, eat one, drop one, and then wander off to chase a sibling. A toddler with sticky hands tries to pat the dough, turning it into a lump that looks more like mud pie than bread loaf. Historians argue over many aspects of Victorian kitchens, but no one denies that the presence of children turned cooking into both a circus and a test of patience. And patience, as you've already learned, is as important as firewood. Of course, you laugh a little at the thought of modern parents plopping kids in front of cartoons while dinner magically comes together in an oven. Here, in the candlelit haze, entertainment means hiding spoons before little hands can fling them across the room. You guard the spice shelf not from thieves, but from curious fingers dipping into the jar of salt as if it were sugar. Every moment feels like juggling knives blindfolded, only with an audience that screams if you drop even one. Sometimes, though, there's sweetness in the chaos. A child sings a rhyme, slightly off-key but charming, and for a fleeting moment the tension eases. You see grubby faces illuminated by the fire, wide-eyed and fascinated by the bubbling pots. You know they're learning by watching, even if it looks like destruction in the moment. And while they make you sigh, they also remind you why you endure the endless stirring, lifting, and scraping. Without them, the meal is just food. With them, it becomes memory. Yet let's not romanticize too much. The truth is, a kitchen full of kids often meant danger. Open flames, sharp knives, heavy kettles balanced on hooks. One wrong step could end in disaster. You keep one eye on the pot and the other on the children, swiveling like a watchdog, praying no one decides to test how hot the iron really is. A funny thought sneaks in. Modern safety gates and plastic covers for outlets would have seemed like sorcery to you. Back then, survival was pure instinct and a well-practiced glare. The chaos carries over into meal. Picture this. You've worked for hours, balancing heavy pans, chopping by candlelight, fighting for a pinch of flavor, only to set down the meal and watch it vanish into small, ravenous mouths before you've even sat. The clatter of spoons, the slurping of broth, the endless demands for Moritz, a performance you never auditioned for, but star in every night, and the applause. A table strewn with crumbs and sticky fingers wiping across your sleeves. And yet, despite it all, you smile, because in the middle of the madness, there's life. Loud, messy, demanding life. Children may add chaos instead of help, but their presence fills the smoky air with something more than stress. They make the exhaustion worth it. Their laughter becomes its own background music, competing with the crackle of the fire. Their stubborn insistence on being part of the kitchen creates memories that, strangely enough, last longer than the food itself. You glance at them now, a small army underfoot, and you realize the Victorian kitchen isn't just a place of survival. It's a stage where family unfolds in all its noisy, exasperating, and lovable forms. The dishes may be plain, the air heavy, and your arms sore, but surrounded by the chaos of little hands and loud voices, you're reminded that cooking was never just about eating. It was about holding the center of the home together, one smoky, noisy evening at a time. And if the children weren't enough to keep your nerves on edge, here comes the next trial, guests. Yes, nothing strikes terror in the Victorian kitchen quite like the announcement that company is coming. Suddenly, Your stew isn't just stew, it's a performance. A full-on spectacle where every spoonful is judged as if you were auditioning for a role you never asked for. The table becomes a stage, the plates your props, and you, dear cook, the nervous actor with soot on your face and sweat dripping down your back. You know the type of guest, the one who takes a delicate sip of soup and then pauses far too long, letting the silence fill the room as though they're composing a review for tomorrow's newspaper. Or the guest who claims they don't eat much, yet manages to clean their plate and still glance hopefully at the serving dish. You stand in the doorway, pretending not to care, but inside, you're holding your breath. Forget Michelin stars, this is the original cutthroat dining review system. There's no hiding in the Victorian era. Meals are expected to impress, not merely to sustain. If the roast is a little tough, it becomes a whispered anecdote at church the next morning. If the pudding sinks in the middle, it earns you a reputation that lasts for months. People didn't scroll Instagram for food fails, they lived them, retold them, and chuckled at your expense. You feel the weight of every bite passing lips, wondering, is this the moment my reputation crumbles with the crust? Hosting isn't just about cooking, though. It's theater. The table must gleam, the cutlery lined up like tiny soldiers ready for battle. Candles flickering with just the right amount of drama. Bread should arrive warm, but not too warm, lest it look rushed. Wine should be poured with elegance, not sloshed like laundry water. And while servants, if you're wealthy enough to have them, help with the illusion, the pressure still rests on you. Because in this society, food isn't only food, it's proof of refinement, of discipline, of how well you can orchestrate a night that convinces everyone you're doing just fine. Thank you very much. And here's the punchline. After all this preparation, most guests don't even notice the hours of labor. They chatter about politics, gossip about neighbors, or comment on the latest scandal in the papers. While you silently pray, no one notices the gravy is just a little too thin. It's almost comical, the sweat of your brow versus the casual fork scrape of someone who will forget half the meal by morning. You want to laugh and scream at the same time, because the truth is, your dinner is the background music to their social lives. Still, there's a sly pleasure when things do go well. When the roast slices cleanly, the pie holds its shape, and someone raises their eyebrows with genuine delight, you feel a thrill no applause could match. Hosting is risky business, but when the gamble pays off, the satisfaction is richer than any spice. You've beaten the odds of fire, smoke, heavy pans, clumsy children, and fickle guests. You've survived, and better yet, you've impressed. Historians suggest that Victorian dinner parties were as much about politics and power as about sustenance. To invite, to host, to feed it, was all part of the intricate social ladder. Some argue these evenings shaped reputations more than sermons or speeches. And while they debate, you just know this. One poorly seasoned pudding could haunt your household name longer than a bad sermon ever could. The absurdity of it makes you chuckle, your whole social standing balanced on the wobble of a jelly. And don't forget the awkward guests. The ones who complain about the food openly, as if their honesty were a gift. Or the ones who bring unsolicited advice. Next time, perhaps more salt. As if you hadn't risked your life leaning over an open fire for hours. Modern readers might think Yelp reviews are harsh, but Victorian households perfected the art of critique face to face, often with a patronizing smile. You learn to nod, to smile, to absorb the sting, all while plotting revenge with an extra peppercorn next time. By the end of the evening, you're drained. The laughter lingers in the hall, the plates sit empty, and you collapse near the hearth with aching arms. The irony hits you. You cooked for hours, performed your role, endured the scrutiny, and what remains? A mountain of dishes and maybe, if you're lucky, a small compliment someone forgot to mumble on their way out. Hosting is exhausting, but it's also strangely satisfying. You've staged the drama, played your part, and though no curtain falls, the night closes with you as the unseen hero of the performance in this dimly lit kitchen. Surrounded by the echo of footsteps fading, you laugh quietly to yourself. Dinner might be over, but tomorrow the play begins again, and you'll be right here stirring, sweating, and silently dreading the next round of applause or critique. Because in Victorian life, every meal is theatre, and you, like it or not, are forever on stage. You've just survived the ordeal of entertaining guests, smiling through gritted teeth while they critiqued every crumb. The candles are extinguished, the benches pushed back, and you'd think cat last piece. But no, the true enemy isn't the neighbor who sniffed at your gravy. It's the silence of the larder, where tomorrow's food sits in the balance between edible and deadly. There's no humming refrigerator to keep things crisp, no freezer waiting like a dependable sidekick. Instead, your weapons against decay are salt, smoke, vinegar, and prayer. Meat hangs from hooks by the hearth, its edges curled and blackened by smoke. The smell clings to everything your clothes, even the neighbors gossip about you. The smoke preserves, yes, but it also guarantees you'll smell like a bonfire long after you've left the kitchen. Salt, meanwhile, is its own tyrant. Barrels of pork rest in brine so thick it could pickle an iron nail. Eating it means your teeth grind against the grains. Your lips pucker, your tongue protests. But salty meat won't kill you, spoiled meat will. And that is the cruel choice you live with. Seasoning that could mummify a body, or freshness that could flatten you with stomach cramps. People joke now about too much sodium in their diet. You'd laugh if your mouth weren't so dry from chewing on salt beef. Grain is no safer. Flour draws weevils like children to mischief. A careful wife might sift the crawling dots out with a fine mesh, pretending nothing happened. After all, bread is life, just. Maybe don't look too closely at the brown flecks in the dough. Cheese, too, has its quirks. Age it too long, and it grows its own colorful personality. Some swear by the flavor, others swear at it. Let's just say the debate continues. Pickling becomes an art form. Carrots, onions, cucumbers, all drowned in vinegar so strong it could strip paint. Every bite makes your eyes water, but it keeps hunger away when winter howls at the door. Fruit, meanwhile, is sliced thin, laid out to dry on racks in the sun. That is, until the neighborhood birds discover your generosity and swoop in, turning your precious apricots into an aerial buffet. You chase them off with a broom, cursing like a sailor, while your children laugh themselves silly. Speaking of children, they're the greatest enemies of preservation. They sneak into the larder, nibbling bread gone slightly furry, calling it fluffy. They dunk grubby fingers into pickle jars, contaminating your one decent store of food. They tug at the smoked sausages, leaving bite marks that look suspiciously human. And when they fall ill, you're left muttering that perhaps the rot wasn't worth the risk after all. It's almost comic when compared to modern times. Today, people complain if their refrigerator takes an extra second to make ice cubes, or if leftovers don't taste fresh after 3 days. Back here, 3 days is fresh. Expiration dates are a fantasy. The only reliable test is your nose. followed by a brave bite and crossed fingers. If you can swallow without gagging, congratulations, dinner. Of course, sometimes bravery tips into recklessness. That leftover pie from last week might look tempting, but once you cut into it, the filling quivers with a life of its own. Do you risk it? Many did, and many regretted it. Yet food waste remained surprisingly low, not because of thrift, but because hunger was persuasive. Even the suspiciously green stew had its takers. Some say that resilience defined the age. Others suggest sheer desperation was the truer force. Scholars still argue, but your stomach doesn't wait for consensus. So every day becomes a gamble with rot. Will your salted beef crack your teeth, but spare your belly? Will the smoked fish taste like a campfire but keep you upright? Or will that seemingly harmless bread send you sprinting for the chamber pot? There is no middle ground. Preserve or perish. And as you lean back from the table, eyeing a slab of meat tough enough to resole boots, you find a crooked smile creeping across your face. Perhaps this is what survival tastes like. Salty, smoky, a little sour, and just barely on the safe side of rotten. Your jaw is still sore from gnawing through salted beef. Your lips puckered from vinegar pickles, and your clothes smell faintly of wood smoke. You think perhaps you deserve a break, just a moment where food doesn't feel like a battle of endurance. But not everyone is left to juggle smoke, salt, and spoiled surprises with their own two hands. Some people, the truly wealthy, have an entire army of servants to wrestle with the kitchen chaos, and at first glance, it sounds glorious. Imagine having someone to stoke the fire while you sip spiced wine, or to scrub the pots while you lounge on embroidered cushions. A maid to fetch water, a cook to chop onions until her eyes sting, a boy to chase away the cats eyeing the roasting goose. Perfect, right? You'd never have to lift a finger. Except, as with most things in history, the dream quickly sours. Because servants aren't just invisible hands. They're eyes, ears, and mouths. They see everything, hear everything, and whisper most things. You can't sneeze without the kitchen knowing what color handkerchief you used. And tension simmers, always. You eat the roast, they gnaw on scraps. You drink wine, they make do with weak ale. You retire to bed, they're still scrubbing grease from the floor by candlelight. This imbalance doesn't exactly encourage workplace morale. Take the cook, for instance. She knows more secrets than the parish priest, and possibly holds more grudges. Forget her birthday, insult her pie, or God forbid complain about the soup being too thin, and you might find your next stew seasoned with accidental handfuls of ash. Servants had ways of expressing displeasure, subtle enough to maintain plausible deniability, but bold enough to sting. And historians, bless them, still debate whether spitting in a lord's porridge was myth, exaggeration, or simply underreported truth. The kitchen boy fares no better. He's up before dawn, trudging to market with a basket bigger than his torso, haggling for onions, then running home to pluck chickens, his hands raw and feathered. The wealthy mistress may wag a finger at his muddy shoes. But really, how clean do you expect feet to be after sloshing through manure-filled alleys at sunrise? Yet he dares not complain. He eats in corners, speaks in whispers, and exists half in shadow. Then there are the maids, endlessly polishing, sweeping, folding, and obeying. They scurry through corridors like ghosts, heard more often than seen, until, of course, one accidentally drops a plate. Then everyone sees her, especially the master, whose outrage rises in direct proportion to the plate's expense. The irony. The same master will happily smash a goblet himself in drunken merriment at dinner, and nobody dares call that clumsy. And yet, for all this tension, the households run like tightly wound clocks. Servants anticipate needs before they're voiced. The fire is already lit when the mistress sighs about the chill. The bread is warm before the lord mentions hunger. Meals arrive on time, clothes are pressed, the household hums. But beneath the polish, resentment simmers like a stew left too long on the hearth. Of course, the wealthy liked to pretend this was harmony. Our staff are like family, they'd say with a smile. Which is true, if by family you mean people who can't leave, are constantly underpaid, and may occasionally dream of your untimely demise. Servants were family only in the sense that you couldn't escape them, even when you wanted to. Sometimes, though tensions burst, a servant caught stealing bread might be dismissed, shamed, or worse. But you can hardly blame them after all. They baked the bread, served the bread, and smelled the bread day after day, all while going hungry. It's like asking a modern office worker to type memos on a chocolate laptop but never take a bite. The temptation is baked in, literally. And speaking of modern times, let's compare, shall we? Today's servants are your gadgets, dishwashers, microwaves, vacuum cleaners, food delivery apps. They never talk back, never whisper your secrets, never slip a spoonful of ash into your soup. They may break down occasionally, yes, but at least your robot vacuum isn't plotting your downfall while circling your coffee table. Back then, every servant had a mind, a memory, and often a grudge. You weren't just employing labor. You were managing personalities, navigating silent rebellions, and occasionally enduring judgmental side-eyes from the scullery maid. Dinner parties, in particular, became theater. Guests saw gleaming silver, smooth courses, and a gracious host. What they didn't see was the chaos backstage. The cook shouting at the kitchen boy for burning the bread, the maid slipping on spilled wine, the footman cursing the heavy tureen, scalding his hands. The performance was seamless, but only because everyone knew the punishment for failure was harsh. Guests clapped for the final flourish, but no one applauded the servant scrubbing grease at midnight. There's another twist here. Servants knew the household better than anyone. They saw who slipped into whose bedroom after dark, who drank too much, who argued over money. They became silent archives of scandal. You think today's tabloids are ruthless? Servant gossip was the 17th century version, whispered into alleyways, traded in markets, fueling entire reputations. A mistress might spend years cultivating an image of grace, only for a talkative laundress to topple it with a single juicy retelling of a drunken mishap. Yet despite the endless labor and the brewing resentments, many families became strangely entangled with their staff. Children grew up closer to their nursemaids than to their parents. Old butlers outlived 3 generations of masters. And sometimes, loyalty did grow not the sweet, movie kind, but the stubborn kind forged from years of surviving side by side. Still, let's not romanticize. For every loyal servant, there was one plotting escape, stealing scraps, or dreaming of better wages. The strain was constant, unavoidable, and thick in the air. To live in a wealthy home was to live under scrutiny. To serve while swallowing pride, to obey while resenting deeply, and you, sitting there with your smoke-stained clothes and salt-parched lips, can't help but wonder if perhaps it was simpler to gnaw your own tough beef than to endure the constant dance of master and servant. One path leaves you hungry, the other resentful. Neither feels like victory, so you exhale, long and slow, imagining the creak of the great house settling for the night. Somewhere upstairs, a lord snores contentedly on feather pillows. Downstairs, a maid yawns as she scrubs. The divide is wide, the tension sharp, but somehow, the household carries on, a fragile balance teetering on exhaustion. And just like that, the glow of the kitchen fire fades into tomorrow's tasks, another day of smoke, salt, service, and strain. After all that smoke, salt, and silent servant resentment, you might think a stroll outside would bring peace. Fresh air, maybe a quiet corner to breathe. Ah, no, not in the marketplace. Step onto those cobbled streets and you are immediately swallowed by noise, smells, elbows, and opinions. The market is less charming town square and more wrestling arena with vegetables as weapons. Picture this, vendors bellowing as if volume alone will prove the quality of their onions. A fishmonger waving a still flapping cod like he's auctioning off treasure. A baker thrusting loaves under your nose, warm and yeasty, daring you to resist. And behind them all, the endless chorus of gossip. Because the market isn't just where you buy food, it's where you exchange information. And sometimes, insults, a neighbor sidles up to you, pretending to admire your carrots, but really whispering about whose daughter was seen sneaking out after dark. Over by the cheese stall, two matrons argue fiercely over whose butter is fresher, though everyone suspects it all came from the same weary cow. A butcher carves his meat with the flair of a stage actor, and the crowd gathers less for the beef than for the stories he tells. And you are swept into it all, buffeted between smells of roasting chestnuts and the unmistakable stench of fish guts. It's chaos. Yes, but organized chaos. Everyone knows their spot, their call, their rhythm. The markets beat like the city's heart, messy, loud, and absolutely essential. You can't survive without it, though you might lose your patience and your coin purse along the way. Pickpockets adore crowded markets. They glide through like eels in a barrel, and while you're distracted sniffing apples, you may suddenly find yourself lighter by a few coins. Historians still argue whether some market stalls ran side hustles with local thieves. But let's just say the coincidences were suspiciously frequent. And then there are the sights. A goose tied to a stall, flapping indignantly while children laugh and scatter. Cats slinking under carts, eyes glinting, waiting for fish scraps. A juggler balancing oranges, while a preacher on a nearby corner bellows fire and brimstone, trying to drown him out. It's less a shopping trip and more a circus, minus the ticket fee. Of course, the smells demand attention. Sweet cinnamon wafting from baked tarts, colliding with the tang of brine from pickle barrels, colliding again with the unmistakable perfume of horse dung warming in the sun. Your nose is under siege, dragged from delight to disgust in the span of 3 breaths. And somehow you keep eating because that fried dough coated in honey looks irresistible, even if it's been handled by fingers that just counted coins, covered in who-knows-what taldron. Naturally, adore the market. They dart between legs, sticky with sugar, shrieking with joy as they chase stray dogs or beg for candied nuts. Parents trail after them, half yelling, half laughing, all while trying not to lose the basket of turnips they actually came for. Meanwhile, the wealthier patrons arrive with servants in tow, sniffing disdainfully at the chaos. Though you'll notice their baskets somehow end up just as full of gossip as they do of food. And gossip here is the real currency. Who's courting whom? Whose bread rose? Whose marriage fell? Which neighbor suddenly has a suspiciously fine new cloak? Markets weren't just about what you ate. They were about how you lived. Your reputation could rise or rot as quickly as fruit left in the sun. A single sharp tongue could spoil you faster than spoiled milk. It's not all light-hearted though. Prices fluctuate wildly, sometimes cruelly. A bad harvest means higher costs, sharper tempers, and fights breaking out over grain sacks. The market becomes a pressure valve for the entire city. Release it too fast, and it bursts. People argue, shove, sometimes brawl, their desperation spilling as quickly as spilled cider. Still, somehow, you love it. The bustle, the noise, the sheer aliveness of it all. It's the opposite of the hushed drawing room or the tense kitchen. It's raw, honest, and constantly moving. You can't stand still. The market won't let you. And comparing it to today, well, let's see. Supermarkets may have air conditioning and tidy aisles, but where's the drama? No one shouts 3 onions for a penny. With the passion of a Shakespearean actor, no one tries to wrestle you into buying sausages by sheer force of personality. Instead, you queue silently, scan your items, and perhaps make awkward eye contact with the cashier. Efficient. Yes, entertaining. Not in the slightest. At least in the old marketplace, you leave with stories. Maybe also fleas, but mostly stories. And when you return home, basket in hand, you're not just carrying leeks and bread, you're carrying the entire pulse of the town, tucked between your turnips, so you wipe honey from your chin. Clutch your coin purse a little tighter, and push through the noise once more, your ears buzzing with rumors, your basket full, your spirit strangely lifted, because in the mayhem of the market, you're reminded that survival isn't only about food, it's about belonging to the great, messy theater of life. The market noise lingers in your ears as you return home, basket heavier than your arms like to admit. You set it down on the worn wooden table, the smell of pickles and fish and sugar still clinging to your clothes. The fire crackles faintly, the smoke curling into the beams overhead, and suddenly the chaos of the day feels very far away. Now it is just you, your tired body, and the promise of one last meal. Dinner is no feast. No grand parade of dishes, no silver platters, no giddy applause of guests. Instead, it is a humble bowl of broth, a crust of bread, maybe a scrap of cheese if fortune has smiled. And somehow, it is enough. You sit, spoon in hand, the steam rising up to your face, warming your cheeks. Each sip tastes like survival, simple and certain. There is no refrigerator humming, no microwave pinging, no app delivering food in under 30 minutes. There is only this: what you scraped, traded, salted, smoked, or begged off a neighbor. The miracle isn't the variety, it's the fact you're eating at all. You think about earlier, chasing off birds from your drying fruit, scolding children for sneaking sausages, bargaining with a vendor who swore his butter was fresher than the Queen's perfume. And now, the day shrinks down into silence. The children, for once, are quiet, their bellies full, their eyes heavy. They curl on straw mattresses in the corner, murmuring nonsense before sleep claims them. The house exhales with them, all that noise and energy melting into peace. Even the servants, those who served with clenched teeth and carried pots heavier than toddlers, are finally still, sharing their own quiet bread in the shadows. Your mind drifts, unbidden, to gratitude. Not the loud, performative kind shouted in markets or prayed theatrically in churches. This is quieter. You look at your rough hands, burned from the hearth, scarred from the knife, strong from the stirring and lifting and endlessly feeding others. And you whisper thanks, not for wealth or glory, but for the small mercies that the meat didn't rot, that the bread rose instead of collapsed, that today, at least, no one went to bed hungry. It's funny, really. Historians will debate great wars, royal scandals, revolutions that shook the globe. Yet what truly carried families forward was often these little bowls of soup in smoky rooms. The laughter tucked between bites, the fragile thread of survival stitched meal by meal. History may roar, but daily life hums, and it is the humming that holds you. You think about the modern world, again about shiny appliances, stocked shelves, ice cream that doesn't melt unless you want it to. People today skip meals on purpose, calling it intermittent fasting, as if hunger were a lifestyle choice instead of a reality that once stalked everyone you knew. You can't help but smirk. Gratitude now means snapping a photo of brunch. Gratitude then meant scraping the pot and finding just enough. The last light fades outside, shadows climbing the walls. You blow out the candle, and for a moment the darkness feels almost kind. The room is bare, but your heart is oddly full. Full of exhaustion, yes, but also of relief. You made it through another day, and here is where the rhythm slows. Your spoon rests in the bowl. The fire pops gently, like a lullaby you didn't know you needed. You stretch your legs, aching, but also steady. The world outside can keep its gossip, its brawls, its endless demands. Tonight, you ask for nothing more than this moment, this quiet, this breath, this softness at the edge of survival. You close your eyes, listening to the faint rustle of straw as someone shifts in their sleep. The air smells faintly of wood smoke and soup, and somehow it's comforting. You think of tomorrow, yes, but distantly, as if it belongs to someone else. For now, the only task is to sink into stillness, to let your body loosen, to let gratitude wrap around you like a blanket, and as you drift, you almost laugh. After all the clattering pots, the salted meat, the gossip, the chaos, it ends like this, not with fanfare, but with silence. A silence so deep, it feels like kindness. Now your breath slows. The fire softens to embers. The night presses close, but not unkindly. The day is done, the work is done, and in this quiet, your heart whispers thanks. Sleep now, rest. Let the world wait until morning. End of script. Sweet dreams.